What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the BlockHash Podcast. Today, we have on Stephen Ward with VyFinance to talk about all the amazing things that they are doing, from their DEX to yielding tokens to staking to their wallet, why they're one of the best on Cardano's chain, and some of the things that they're working on coming up here in 2024. So, Stephen, welcome to the show, man. I know we're going to have quite a deep conversation today and dive into quite a lot. Appreciate you taking the time. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on, mate. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Before we jump in and, really kind of get into it, let's talk about you a little bit. I'm sure people will be interested to kind of get a little bit of an understanding of who you are, your story, your background, kind of how you wound up in the space with VyFinance. What is it, man?
So, yeah, absolutely. So my crypto journey started in 2017, but my trading journey started well before then. I started my career as a trader at a hedge fund where I was trading in short-term interest rates and bonds. From there, we were looking at yield curve trading specifically. That's sort of the area that I was specializing in. From there, I went to work in stock brokerages because I got a little bit sick of bonds and I wanted to go try out stocks. It happens. You want to go experience something new.
I can imagine.
And then I was in stock brokerages for about 2 years before I hit into crypto in sort of 2016. And it was there that I really fell in love with trading it. I understood the systems fairly well. So my background in studies is physics. And the sort of systems made mathematical sense to me. And that's what drew me to Cardano, was my mathematical background. And I really went deep into DeFi trading. I won and lost in 2017. I think everyone did, made a fortune, lost a fortune. And then in 2020 and late 2019 into 2020, I started trading DeFi on Tron and DeFi on Ethereum. And that's where my life really changed. I suddenly had a realization that liquidity pool mining was actually incredibly similar mathematically to interest rate swaps, in that an interest rate swap is where I take one currency, I convert it to another currency, and then I put it into an interest-bearing asset. So I'm managing the currency risk of the other currency, but I'm earning an interest for holding that currency risk. And a liquidity pool is the exact same thing, but you only need to swap out half the currency. So I now swap out half of my currency for, let's say, Ethereum, and I swap half of it into Tron back in the early days, or Tron into Just token. And now I'm managing 50% Just risk, and I'm earning an interest in return for doing so. So the mathematics to it were almost identical, and I took to it like a fish to water. It just suddenly felt like, oh my God, this is what I've always wanted to be trading my whole life. So I dove really deep into it, and realizing that smart contracts were launching on Cardano and everything was sort of coming to Cardano, sort of 3.5, 4 years ago, I really jumped and I was like, well, okay, I understand these systems well. I know what's going on. So in sort of early to mid 2020, I started designing my own DEX, using the UTXO model on Cardano. And I think we've been able to build something that's entirely unique. And that's what we're going to be going into, because my whole reason for using this technology was to be able to build a DEX that just behaves differently to every other one.
Why Cardano? Everyone's, these days talks about Ethereum, Solana. Cardano's, been one of those quiet builders in the space for a long time. But I know they have that fantastic ecosystem. What was attractive about doing this on Cardano versus elsewhere?
Look, there's a few layers to it, right? First, I was always attracted to Cardano because of my mathematical background. So the model of Cardano sort of felt, I don't want to sound like a Puritan, but felt pure to me. It was,
Sure.
It made a lot of sense. It's also the most closely aligned with Bitcoin's model. Like, it is basically just the Bitcoin blockchain. Bitcoin blockchain plus. So that's certainly something that attracted me fairly heavily. The other big one, I think, and this is, something about the time that we launched and we started this project, that the entire Bitcoin blockchain when we started was empty. There was no other projects there. We were one of the first 8 projects to openly say that we were building on Cardano. So what that really allows is to create a point of market difference, right? Because we were able to build a name for ourselves when Ethereum was already a crowded market and BNB was literally a shitstorm. So you weren't going to get too much attention on BNB if you wanted to build a serious product, right? And I'm not here to just build a meme coin and walk away, or just do a pump and dump and walk away. I'm here for a career. I'm here to build products for the next 15, 20 years on blockchain and integrate blockchain systems, right? So that's sort of my field of expertise, and that's what I want to keep building in, and I want to do it seriously. And I found that if I wanted the best ability to create a longevous name for ourselves at that point in time, the best option was Cardano. We are working on layer 2s now and working on vector chain, and that will down the line grow into cross chain. So we're not planning on only being Cardano forever, but we certainly are very grateful and very honored, I guess, to have the position that we do within the Cardano ecosystem because of the amount of time that we've been there.
So what's different about VyFinance then compared to, other DEXs out there? I know there's other ones on Cardano's chain as well. What's the separating factor that makes you guys unique?
There's heaps. So I refer to us, and I think, this is something that we want to turn into a tagline, really. We are the most uniquely Cardano DEX of all the DEXs, right? So we are the only DEX that truly sat down and looked at Cardano's systems and thought to ourselves, okay, how do we build a DEX that implements Cardano's systems rather than building a DEX that looks like a DEX on other blockchains? And there are many cases and points to this. Let's use my favorite, of course, which is non-custodial LP farming. So sounds like you've used DEXs before and you've got experience with liquidity provision. Yeah. So whenever you integrate or you do a liquidity provision, you're essentially getting 2 tokens, you're adding the LPs, you're taking those LPs, you're putting them into a farm. If you're on another blockchain that's not Cardano, you need to approve that farm. And then you deposit those tokens into the farm. They stay there. You don't think about them anymore. Those LP tokens are essentially a dummy token that you instantly throw out of your wallet and put into a farm, and then you just pull them back to withdraw liquidity when you want to stop farming. Now, this is a super simplistic way of thinking about liquidity pool tokens, because liquidity pool tokens are themselves a derivative of the 2 contents that they represent. So if I've got Ethereum Bitcoin liquidity, that liquidity pool token is 50% Ethereum and 50% Bitcoin. It's not just representative of it. It is truly that, like I can directly turn it into that. So these LP tokens often get pushed to the wayside and forgotten about, when in reality, they should be valuable tokens in their own right. So one of the ways that we can try and unlock the value of these tokens is to give people the capacity to keep these tokens in their wallet instead of just thinking of them as something that gets thrown away to a farm. So that's why we implemented non-custodial LP farming. Now, I'm not sure if people are aware, but on Cardano, we have what's called non-custodial staking. So that means that when you stake your Cardano to a staking contract, you're able to hold the Cardano in your wallet. It is completely free to do whatever you want with, but you're still earning staking rewards at the same time. So it's staked while simultaneously being available to you, right? Now, we essentially took this concept and we applied it to liquidity mining, where we said, if you create an LP token and that LP token sits in your wallet, you are instantly farming that LP token. You don't need to put it into any farm. You don't need to approve any farm. You don't need to do anything with it. It just sits in your wallet and you're automatically farming. Now, this has a few advantages. The first advantage, of course, is that there's no such thing as farming or harvesting individual farms on our system. There's only a roll-up that allows you to harvest everything at once. So from a user perspective, that's a lot easier to manage your harvests, particularly on Cardano, where they don't really have a harvest roll-up. And secondly, and I think more importantly, we are now able to create tools that implement these liquidity pool tokens themselves. So the first tool that we implemented is a layer 2. Oh, let me stop there for a moment. Do you have any questions on that? That's already a lot.
No, I got you. I'm following.
Following? Beautiful.
Yeah, you're good.
So the first implementation that we made was layer 2 LPs. This is essentially, or layer 2 liquidity pools. Mm-hmm. This is essentially the capacity to take an LP token and then use that LP token to provide liquidity with, to then create a layer 2 liquidity. Now, this has two impacts for the users, but just from a product perspective, this most closely resembles a balancer 80-20 pool on Ethereum. So a balancer 80-20 pool is a liquidity pool that's got 20% one token and 80% another token, often used with stables and a tertiary coin, or a tertiary coin and stables, to be able to create pools with a more bespoke impermanent risk ratio, where you're either having less impermanent risk on the side of the token or more impermanent risk on the side of the token. Our layer 2 LPs, so if you take an LP, create an LP token, and then provide that LP token to liquidity again, you functionally created a liquidity pool, which is 75-25. So our L2 LPs behave essentially like a balancer 80-20, but the ratio is 75-25. And we allow users to do this with multiple different LP tokens on our system to essentially reduce their net exposure to certain tokens that they want to reduce their net exposure to. But where this is really powerful is that this now isn't just a tool that builds a slightly different liquidity pool. This is a tool that now lets users buy liquidity pool tokens directly from our DEX. And this means, because we've got non-custodial staking, you can buy a liquidity pool token directly from our DEX, and as soon as the trade completes, you're instantly farming. So we call this one click to farm, which is something that's completely unique in all of crypto. We are the only system in crypto that you can go to our front-end DEX, do one single trade, and you've instantly engaged with liquidity and begun farming that liquidity without doing anything else. The only action a user has to take to begin farming is pick a liquidity pool and buy the LP tokens. You don't need to provide liquidity. You don't need to go through the rigmarole of collecting 2 tokens and then put it through. The simplest format is really as simple as just buy LP. I'm instantly farming and I don't have to think about anything else. I can buy 12 different LP.
Yeah. The idea is to simplify the process here. Exactly.
We're trying to minimize the workload that any user has to do to engage with liquidity pool mining. And that's a power that the EUTXO model really provides, is this sort of simplification of process, because we're able to create, well, it really comes down to Plutus and the functional programming language itself, but we're able to create really clear steps that don't require much tertiary validation, I think is the easiest way to describe it. An engineer would probably tell you I'm an idiot. But what that means is that I can take a lot of systems, like functionally, I can take a lot of systems that we see on other blockchains and I can turn it into a 1 or 2 step process, right? Another example of that is the distributive mechanism, right? So our distributive mechanism for VyFi is entirely built. So we built the first, I should start at the beginning there. We built the first distributive mechanism on Cardano, and we've built the only smart contract managed distributive mechanism on Cardano. And what that means is that all the fees that are collected on our DEX, we automatically roll up those fees that are collected on our DEX, convert them to VyFi, and then distribute it to the holders of our token through our bar. Now, this behaves similar to the sushi bar, but what's really cool is that because we're dealing with Cardano here, we don't actually need users to serve or to actually run the transactions that do these roll-ups of fees that then get sent through to our bar. These are actually built into the transactions of our system. So all a user has to do is convert their VyFi to XVyFi and then just wait. There's zero engagement required from any user at any point in time, because all of these systems are being managed automatically in the background through the smart contract. Now, this is different to distributive mechanisms that you see on Ethereum, which often require, or almost always require, that a user or a participant on the platform engage with the actual serving or the conduction of that trade to distribute those tokens. Now, part of the reason for that is, of course, the cost of doing a transaction on Ethereum. I mean, L1 products on Ethereum, often, if you're going to be running an automatic process like we're running in the background, you know, you would be spending thousands and thousands a day on transaction fees just for running that automatic process in the background. So instead, what you do is you get a user to take on that cost when it becomes viable to the market to take on that cost for that user. But we don't have that problem in Cardano. So we're able to roll up all of these systems ourselves and manage it, right? So, I mean, just as a starting point from those two, we've got our one click to farm and non-custodial staking. We've got the Cardano's equivalent of balancer 80-20 pools, which are L2 LPs, which give you a risk ratio of 75-25, and also allow you to boost your farm while doing so, because you're able to get a farm for the layer 2 LP plus the farm for the layer 1 LP. And on top of that, we have ourselves the first and only smart contract managed distributive mechanism on the entire blockchain of Cardano. We built also, just to add, the first lottery on Cardano as well. That's entirely managed on chain. So we have a DEX lottery, which is a bit of fun. And the next one that we're building is our auto harvester, which I'll go into in a bit more depth later because that's an entire product of its own. But I think that sort of sums up the three major points of difference in how we've implemented currently, and we're going to be expanding on all of these, but how we've currently implemented Cardano's blockchain to give users unique tools and easier interface for engaging with liquidity.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because it's a lot of stuff and it's, really helpful and really cool and makes the process a lot more streamlined, easier for people to, get into staking and farming. But like, do you have a way to automate it for people like that are new to this stuff, that aren't as familiar, that, they connect their wallet to VyFinance, they see all the options, they can see what they can do. But like, could they just push a button and let the process happen for themselves? Like just auto distribute their funds towards the best yield or something like that?
Correct. So that is absolutely the next part that we're building out, which is the auto harvester. And what's really cool about the auto harvester as well is that this should be blockchain generalizable rather than it just being Cardano specific, which is something that's really cool. So what that means is that we essentially do a system which has got a strategy. As you just stated, that strategy might be top 5 yields on the platform, full stop, right? With a distribution of 20% to the top 5 yields on the platform. We're not caring what tokens they are in that strategy. It's just whatever's got the top 5 yields. Or we could do it as gaming tokens. So it's focused on gaming tokens that you're able to add liquidity to. We might want to do AI tokens. You can set up your strategy however the strategy is set up. And then users, rather than needing to collect 5 separate LPs and harvest those and check on them every now and then to make sure that their risk ratios aren't going out of whack and they're losing heaps of money, rather they will have a machine that essentially just collects all those harvests for them and then makes sure that as the values are changing on the underlying assets, those assets are balanced accordingly, right? Mm-hmm. And this system is called an auto harvester. This is what we're in the middle of building right now. So this even further simplifies the process, as you said, for users to engage, because rather than even needing to commit the one transaction, but that still requires the work in understanding what are each of these tokens that I'm engaging with? Do I want to engage with each of these tokens? But rather than doing it on an individual basis, rather you take an indexed approach. And I think that that's something that is really important in the evolution of a blockchain and hasn't really started on Cardano yet. It's the capacity to take an indexed approach to your investments, whereby rather than needing to manage everything individually, I can take a bundle and I can say, okay, I want to engage with Cardano gaming risk. And then you throw it into the Cardano gaming risk, and then you're able to engage with that as a whole rather than needing to pick out individual games. And this is something that is certainly available on other blockchains and is almost considered expected, I would say, on other blockchains that we haven't yet performed effectively on Cardano. And we are really hoping to have this out by the end of the year with sort of an initial 3 or 4 introductory strategies. What we're really excited about, though, is we think we'll be able to build our first form. And this is still conjecture, so I'm not going to say this is definitely the case, but we think we'll be able to build our first form of this auto harvester as a cross-chain system. I'd rather use the term omni-chain, actually, because it's sort of acting as a spider web between chains, whereby you can be on different chains, but regardless of what chain you're on, you can engage with an automated strategy on another chain using the crypto on that other chain. So for example, you could be on Cardano and there's a strategy for gaming tokens on Ethereum. And then you'd be able to deposit your Cardano into that strategy. And then the system takes that to Ethereum and manages it for you on Ethereum, or vice versa. You might want to engage with gaming tokens on Cardano and you have some Ethereum. So you'd put Ethereum onto the Ethereum side of the system, and then it sends it over to Cardano to manage gaming tokens on Cardano. And where we want to take this, which is really cool, is we can start to develop split chain strategies, whereby we would say, rather than gaming on Cardano or gaming on Ethereum, you can start to go, okay, well, how about just blockchain gaming? and then we'll take 30% of that on games that are on Matic or Polygon. I can't never remember which one it's called now. 30% of that on games on Ethereum, 30% of that on games on Cardano, and then we'll finish off with 10% of games on pick another blockchain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the idea behind the auto harvester. It makes a lot of sense. If you think about the kind of people that are getting into DeFi, and again, DeFi has been around for like 4 years legitimately. It's very new to people. You're trying to learn this part of the space, and you're trying to understand all the different things you can do. For me, it's confusing sometimes too. And I'm someone trying to keep my head in the space all the time, talking to geniuses like yourself. And I'm like, you can do that.
Nice.
So I think being able to automate more things like this further and allow people to take advantage of the best yields or the best strategies or the best tokens to stake without having to go through the due diligence of having to pick every single thing every single time. And it's hard for people to build out strategies, right? It's like saying, here's the stock market, good luck. It's the same thing there as it would be for here. It's just here you have the ability to automate those processes so people can just, sit back and enjoy it, I guess, in a sense.
And I look, I'm someone who's worked in markets for years, and I actually had this discussion recently with a colleague of mine. He came to me and was like, Stephen, you got some experience in stocks. I really want to start getting involved in some stocks and, start trading stocks. And then I looked at him. He's been working with me for like 3.5 years. I just looked at him. I'm like, okay, you've been in Cardano now for 3.5 years. How well do you feel like you understand the Cardano market? And he's like, yeah, I think I understand it pretty well. And I'm like, okay, yeah, fair enough. So do you feel confident trading the Cardano markets? And he's like, yeah, Cardano and Cardano coins, I feel pretty confident. I know it really well. And I'm like, okay, fantastic. How well do you know medical device market? And he was like, oh, not really. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Okay. How well do you know the automotive industry? And he's like, I like cars. And then I'm like, yeah, you like cars, but how well do you know the industry and what drives that industry on a financial basis? And he's like, oh, I don't. And I'm like, exactly. You're a professional in the Cardano market, right? You know how much work it takes to become a professional in any given market. Know that there are people out there that have done that for whatever you want to invest in. Use an index fund.
Yeah.
Right? You want healthcare risk? No worries. Take on healthcare risk. Send it to a manager who spent their entire career specializing in the healthcare market. Right? Because like you, if someone wants to know what's going on in Cardano, they should come to you and ask you. You know what's going on. Right? And it's that level of hyper speciality that's required in truly understanding any market. And you've been in markets for a while now, so you understand this. It requires such a high level of knowledge, concentration, understanding, just to keep up with a market, let alone to then make effective decisions based on live information that you're receiving regarding what's happening in that market. So yeah, the only way that we're going to be able to simplify this process, particularly on Cardano, is by creating these index strategies that allow users to exactly that, not have to forcibly specialize themselves in every individual aspect of the market, because that's a lot of work and it's putting a lot of onus on individual users to essentially become semi-market professionals before they're able to effectively engage.
I feel like this is something that should have existed for quite a while now. And so I'm glad you guys are working on it. And it just makes everything so much easier for people to really get involved in the space. What is available through your guys' DEX? Is it mainly Cardano tokens in the ecosystem, or are there other digital assets that people can, get exposure to, or what all do you guys want to encompass?
Yeah. So at the moment, we've got Cardano assets, and that's our major focus on our DEX right now. The big thing that we're working on at the moment, which I sort of briefly mentioned, is we're working on building a layer 2 on Vector. And building that layer 2 on Vector chain is going to really allow us. I don't know. Do you know anything about Apex Fusion? Should I go to a background?
It's familiar, but I don't know a lot.
Yeah, I'll do a bit of a background there. So Apex Fusion are building. I'm not really sure if it's a layer 2. It might be like a tertiary layer. There's so many like little technicalities as to what they specifically fall under in terms of taxonomy. So I'll just call it a layer 2. Yeah, it's a layer. So it's a layer that sits on top of Cardano, which is basically going to be connected to another blockchain that they're building, which is a layer 2 for Ethereum called Nexus. So they're going to have the Vector chain and the Nexus chain that are able to talk to each other. And one is a layer 2 for Ethereum and one is a layer 2 for Cardano. And we're working rather closely with their team to build out these systems for hopefully to be one of the first DEXs on the vector chain, if not the first DEX on the vector chain on their launch. But secondly, to build these systems in such a way that we're able to easily migrate this over onto the Nexus chain and then start integrating assets from other blockchains and from EVM chains within our system. And this isn't going to be an overnight process, but given that we want to be generating cross-chain auto harvesting strategies, this is the process that to me makes the most sense, in that we're able to then offer cross-chain auto harvesting strategies that are also being utilized on our own DEX rather than just being utilized on other DEXs, even if they're a cross-chain strategy. So our current plans are to build into layer 2 chains on Cardano and then expand out onto other blockchains to allow us to build a more and more robust auto harvesting ecosystem to make it easier and easier for users to engage in more complex and more intricate strategies that are being automated on their behalf.
Another thing I want to ask is, and I actually think you mentioned it earlier, is about the lottery system that you guys have too. That's another thing I haven't quite seen yet. Is it something where you guys have a liquidity pool that's like dedicated to that? And like, do people put in like a certain amount into the pool? Like, is it like gambling essentially, or how does it work?
It is gambling. It's super simple. I was really proud of it when I designed it, because there was almost like an obvious solution that no one had implemented yet. And I was like, can't be that simple, really. So basically what we do is we're using the blockchain itself for randomness. So with every time a block is minted, you get a block hash. And that block hash is just a number, a hexadecimal number that represents that block. So people are able to mint a ticket or create a lottery ticket, right? And that lottery ticket just sits in a wallet. The lottery ticket, contract, sorry. That lottery ticket is then essentially just a hexadecimal number, right? And with the block hash at a specific time, when the lottery ticket is drawn, so the winner is chosen, we look at the block hash on that specific block that the winner is drawn. We take the last 4 digits of that block hash, and then we just compare it to all the tickets, right? You can either have 1 match, a 2 match, a 3 match, or a 4 match. And then depending on how many you've matched, your wallet can then accept the reward for having matched it, right? And that's coming from the kitty that's being collected from all the people that have purchased the tickets.
And so can you interact with like all this functionality? You just connect like a MetaMask or connect like your Coinbase wallet, or do you have to have a specific like wallet interface to?
At the moment, Cardano isn't on MetaMask. So at the moment, you need a Cardano wallet. Okay. So that would be a NAMI, an Eternal, NuFi. NuFi is one that works across multiple blockchains, including Cardano. Or if you're using a mobile wallet, I would recommend using Vesper, VESPR, which is the Cardano mobile wallet. As we start moving into Vector Chain and we start moving on to the other chains, we expect to be going onto MetaMask and onto Coinbase wallet and onto these other wallets that are going to be much easier for another community to then be able to engage, right? Because we do know that one of the hardest barriers we have on the Cardano blockchain is that there is a tertiary layer of difficulty to engagement in the first place, because you need to get a different wallet, which a lot of people can be reticent to do.
That there's a lot of wallets across the Web3 ecosystem. So it's a little difficult for people when you have to find a way to onboard. Then you have to pick a wallet you like, and then you realize you can't use that wallet. So you got to pick another wallet, and then that wallet's not compatible somewhere else. So you got to move it to another wallet. Then you got to do a conversion. Yeah, it gets a little tricky sometimes, especially when you have completely different ecosystems, like between Ethereum and Cardano and Solana, and things don't always mishmash.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Look, and this is, I think, going to be the next phase of blockchain that we're going to start hitting in the next 3 to 5 years. And that's really a push for interoperability between chains. And you're already starting to see that with, now you're even getting like layer 3s on Ethereum that are popping up, you know, like at the end of the day, the ecosystem on a political level, and I use the term political in inverted commas, but it is a politique, so to speak, you know, the community's politique, is very much separated into these island nations or city-states, you know, where like, I am the city-state of Solana, I am the city-state of Cardano, I'm the city-state of Bitcoin, I'm the city-state of Ethereum, and we don't like each other. And It's always seemed a little bit weird to me that we don't like each other when we're all targeting the same goals. I understand it from a bag pumping perspective in that I want my bags to pump and not someone else's, but it feels counterproductive to be attacking people that are trying to build out the same goals that we're trying to build out. Rather, we should be trying to learn from each other and building the system better together. That's how we improve. And luckily, the communities are all there screaming at each other, being like Solana sucks and Cardano sucks, and I don't think anyone says Ethereum sucks really, but even though that's the one that probably does the most. At least they do say that it sucks from a user perspective, but they're not going to say that like Ethereum sucks as a system. Now, what the builders, on the other hand, and this is something that for the most part, I'm always really respectful of the blockchain builders. The builders, on the other hand, most of us don't hold this opinion. I can go to a builder on DOT and I can say I'm building on Cardano, and they're like, fantastic, tell me about it. And I'll be the exact same to them. Same with going to a builder on Solana or going to a builder on Ethereum. They'll ask you, oh, why did you choose to build on Cardano? But that's going to be the extent of it, right? Apart from that, they're going to be like, oh, what's different about your system? What are you guys doing that's unique? How are you guys implementing that? How does that work within your system? These are the same things I'm asking them, right? We're not here to fight each other as builders. We're here to learn what we can from each other. And this actual background builder community across all these different blockchains are starting to interact more and more. So you're starting to see, and you will start to see more and more projects that have now got developers that have had 5, 8 years or 5, 6 years experience. So they've now got experience across 2, 3 different blockchains, right? Yeah. And they've built on a few different blockchains now. And we're going to start to be able to truly see what I refer to as omni-chain rather than just cross-chain, right? Because cross-chain is this concept that like I bridge my token to another chain and then I do something with it there that is independent on what I'm doing on this chain here. They're kind of like two separate systems. System 1 on this chain, system 2 on that chain. Omni-chain is much more the concept of the system functions across multiple chains, but they're not separate units of value. It's not as if I'm separating my value into this chain and separating my value into that chain. Rather, I'm using it as a web that's building value across the chains because they're all united as a single system rather than being separate systems everywhere. And I think this push for omni-chain that we're going to see over the next 3 years, I'm really hoping 3 to 5 years, like within 5 years' time, I'm hoping we'll start to see a lot of omni-chain projects, is really going to bring up the entire ecosystem as a whole, in that it'll hopefully start to break down these barriers of us versus them-ism that we find between blockchains, and rather realize that we are all working together and we're going to be stronger as a group rather than hating each other, even though we're all technically on the same team.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think interoperability is going to be one of the most important things over the next 5 years to continue developing out for everybody. The reason why I think that is because I don't think there's going to be one chain to rule them all. I don't think that is realistic. Even though there's plenty of crypto zealots out there, it's not going to happen. There's always going to be a multi-chain ecosystem. But I don't think you're going to have everything on every single chain either. I think some chains will be hyper specialized to certain industries. Like, for example, Solana could, 80% in the future of their dApps and development could be gaming focused, whereas Ethereum's could be finance focused and Cardano could be something else. And, every chain, could sit within a layer of different industries that really need this technology and build out applications specific to those industries. And that's fantastic. And I think that's what'll end up happening is you'll have this very specified multi-chain ecosystem, but value for ordinary people, the only way this works is if you can interop and move money through all these different industries. Like if you're using some blockchain solution for an insurance provider and you're sending money that way and you're paying someone, that insurance provider, has probably got to pay their bills. So they got to send that probably to another chain for another industry that maybe handles their mortgage, right? And, so there's going to be real estate, there's going to be insurance, there's going to be, the retail market for buying and selling goods. There's going to be food and going out to restaurants. It's going to get so diverse and everything's going to get hyper specialized, at least from what I feel is starting to happen. that, yeah, you got to have interoperability so that your money can very seamlessly move through this crypto cyberspace from one chain to another without having to think about it. You can't just bridge everything. It's not realistic.
Exactly. And what you're describing there is already sort of what the traditional finance landscape looks like. There isn't a bank that fits all. There's no such thing as a bank that provides every single banking service. Why? Because if you try to provide every single banking service, you're going to do all of them like shit because you're not specialized. So what you need to do is you specialize. You've got banks that work in specifically investment banking. You've got banks that work specifically in retail banking. You've got banks that work specifically in commercial banking. You've got all these, you've got banks that work specifically as just, what are they called? Closing houses. They just settle trades, right? They're not even working in investment banking itself. They're literally just letting people settle trades, right? And that's their entire job. Yeah. This hyper level of specialization is needed because every single one of those tasks have got an incredibly high level of specificity and technical requirements that go alongside it. And the blockchain's exactly the same. All of these tasks that you mentioned, just insurance, and we haven't even talked about reinsurance, which is a huge industry in of itself. How would an insurer talk to a reinsurer on the blockchain? Well, the blockchain that manages reinsurance can't look like the blockchain that manages insurance because one deals with retail and the other one deals with commercial. And a commercial insurance system is going to look very different to a retail insurance system. Right?
Exactly. And what are you going to do if your best solution is on one chain and you're on another one? That's where the issue arises.
Exactly. Right. So exactly as you're saying, if we want to be able to get the best products, it is an inevitability that we have to move in that direction. And I'm really happy that unlike a lot, and this is basically, I guess, my core point, unlike a lot of the communities and maxis out there that get really angry, and I'll be honest, most of those are people that have never built a product. You do have the occasional maxi that do go out and build products. But for the most part, the maxis are the armchair neckbeards. I didn't say that. Sorry.
Just own it.
Yeah, just own it. When you're talking to the real builders and people that are making products, you certainly don't have this incredibly single-minded view of a blockchain or a single-minded view of the ecosystem whereby one blockchain is somehow superior to all the others just by definition of their bags, right? That's not the mode of thought that the builders have.
Exactly. And I speak to a lot of builders too, and it's different than users in the ecosystem. Builders are much more open these days. Probably not as much in the past, but these days they're much more open to share ideas and to learn and to, figure out how to interact with each other's ecosystems. Because I think they're starting to realize, it's not all about Ethereum or it's not all about Bitcoin. People want to be in different places for different things, and interoperability is going to help bring more value to your ecosystem. It's not going to be like a drain suck like most people think. It's just going to make it easier for value to go back and forth. That's a good thing. You want that. Whereas with users, it's more like, you get your diehard Solana crowd, you get your Bitcoin zealots, you get your Ethereum maxis. And I think that'll always exist because people, have personal feelings towards, these chains they want to use. And that's fine. But I think the most important thing is developers, realizing how important it is to really share and connect.
Mm-hmm. And I think the next part of that is to try and convey that to the community, because I guess, and this is something that is just the reality of the social media landscape, in that controversy creates clicks. And if we're able to field controversy and make people feel as if there's controversy happening, we're going to get more engagement with that social media, which in turn feeds that very underlying issue that we're discussing, and creates a circular cycle. So from a user perspective, I think there's a lot of work in doing and actually trying to cut that cycle of attacks that we have on each other. And I think the best way to do that is just by the builders just not listening to it, putting things together, and then people will just start using other stuff naturally through the implementations of these products. Because if the products are integrated, then the user doesn't necessarily need to know that they're using it. Right? They don't need to know that they're using X blockchain to conduct Y activity, right? All they need to know is that I'm able to do X.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Right. And that I guess is the next phase that we're trying to get to or a phase that we're trying to get to in blockchain. I don't think it's the next, it's probably 2 or 3 down, is that real sort of seamless integration with the technology or with the day-to-day systems that we have in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like the internet took a lot of steps to get to the point where now the internet is here and I can do everything with it. Right? It's seamlessly integrated into our day-to-day lives. And there's a lot of systems that we're going to be able to optimize using the blockchain and integrate into day-to-day lives seamlessly, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. That's what's so exciting. There's so much scope for growth in this industry and so much scope to create new and exciting products that will really help and change the world.
It's funny because when you think about how complex the internet actually is, and most people don't even think about it, and we interact with it so seamlessly today, that's got to be how this industry works, because it works. Like, it's not like there's anything in this industry that we aren't able to do. We're innovating every single day, and that's fantastic. But how easy is it for my parents or my grandparents to use this system? Like, I have to study it for a day to really understand how to use a certain wallet sometimes, and that's just as basic as you get into this onion of layers for a blockchain. How are people a couple generations older supposed to figure this stuff out? I think we definitely need to have better UI practice within the industry, and I think we need to make things a little bit more mobile too. Everything's being done on desktop still, and there's tons of complexities that can be, I think, boiled down. But I think once we get there, things are going to flow very fast.
That's it, and that's what we're targeting, is essentially a better system for almost everything, at least in the financial markets. As an example, settlement. Settlement becomes so easy on blockchain, like so easy. And I mean, people that don't work in traditional finance and haven't had the experience of dealing with settlement houses or clearing houses and people that specialize in settlement, it's a multi-billion dollar industry. And their entire job is just to say, yeah, stamp, he's got the money to sell, he's got the money to buy. Next, yep, stamp, he's got the money to sell, he's got the money. Sorry, he's got the money, he's got the asset to sell, he's got the money to buy. Stamp, he's got the asset to sell, he's got the money to buy. That's all they do. They just look at two people's bank accounts and say, oh yeah, that's all right, you can trade. And they're charging a fortune for it. There's an entire industry that the blockchain just annihilates, because we don't need to charge for that service. I can just look at the wallet.
What do you think about the Cardano ecosystem going forward? Do you think it can match or even surpass what Ethereum is doing today? Maybe be bigger than it, maybe just be equal to it. Where do you think its future lies? Because I know I've been following Charles for a very long time, and I've been following the development for Cardano for a very long time, and I love the ecosystem, but they do take their time. It's a very competitive world now. Where do you think things are going over the next half decade or so?
Oh, that's a long time. I think in the immediate future, the first thing that we're going to be really working on in Cardano now, it looks like, is layer 2s. Because we've sort of understood the boundaries, the limitations, and the difficulties of building on Cardano itself. And now we've understood them well enough that we know what needs to be improved, we know what needs to be fixed, and we think we can implement layer 2s that are able to do this in a more optimal manner. So we've got a whole string of layer 2s that are sort of being built and constructed now, which will act much like Matic does on Ethereum, or Polygon, or whatever it's called now. And there's multiple layer 2s on Ethereum. So, that's the one that just sticks to my head immediately. These systems, I think, are really exciting for Cardano in that it should increase the capacity for all of our projects to meet the goals that we want to meet in terms of development. Because now we should have systems that we can lean on that are either easier to build on than Cardano, or have got a different set of technical capacities. So, like different throughputs, different values on the actual basis of the blockchain that allows us to create things that behave in a different manner. We can use the structure of that layer 2 rather than the structure of Cardano, I guess, is the easiest way to describe it. I'm trying to think of how to say that in a way that doesn't sound like I'm an engineer with autism. So if we're able to really push these layer twos, which I'm excited about, I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity to bring in new people and bring in a much more streamlined and effective utility for the blockchains that exist. And this is the same. I should add to that, though. The one thing that kind of worries me a little, but not, just sort of on a philosophical basis, is that this is the exact same path that Ethereum took to growth. And just because it worked for Ethereum doesn't necessarily mean I think it'll work for Cardano. But this is definitely something that we need to try. We've got the largest governance structure coming out in a couple of weeks. We've just voted for the Intersect committee. I'm not 100% sure how effective the governance structure is going to be. But what my hope is that this governance structure is able to do is really refocus efforts on the core tooling that new developers need to be able to engage. Because that's the biggest barrier at the moment to engaging with Cardano as a builder, is just the massive step of difficulty that you have to be able to start in this blockchain. It's 5x more expensive than every other blockchain. And that's just the reality. So we need to bring down that development cost if we really want to see Cardano be able to pick up. And that's where the layer twos are exciting, because the layer twos do bring down that development cost. And I think that last but not least is exactly what I was saying, which is that omni-chain structure. As more and more products and projects go omni-chain, that's including in and out of the Cardano ecosystem, I see that as a universal build-up for all of blockchain together, not just the Cardano blockchain. We've got some really unique tools and some really unique structures that we can do on Cardano that we can't do anywhere else, And we want to show them off. Like VyFi, honestly, is us attempting to show off these powers, so to speak, because you can't do one click to trade, one click to farm on any other blockchain. That's not even something you could conceive on another blockchain. The design doesn't allow you to do it. Being able to create tertiary layers of farming because of the capacity to reuse liquidity pool tokens, again, is something that you can't do on other blockchains, at least not built into the structure of a DEX. So as we work more and more, there's sort of two sides to this, right? There's going to be an omni-chain approach where we're able to show off these technologies and these powers that we have to more and more users. But at the same time, we're going to have these layer twos that are going to be simplifying the engagement and the building structures for Cardano itself. And I think combined, what we're going to see is an ecosystem that becomes more accessible and easier to build on. So I guess in 5 years' time, where I see us is, I don't know. I don't know if like bigger, or I don't like using the idea of like same size or bigger or smaller than Ethereum. I think that sort of negates the importance of niche and finding your place within the market, right? I don't need to be the size of Ethereum to be an important and recognized niche that's able to drive value and drive profit to the ecosystem, right? What I need is to have a functional niche that performs its actions to a very high degree. And that's something that Cardano performs incredibly well. And we're only getting better. So as for, I don't want to compare it to the size of other blockchains. I think that's a bit of an unfair comparison. But what I think is really important is that we're already finding niches for ourselves and implementations for these technologies that you can't do with other blockchains. And that will allow us to have a point of difference into the future, which should allow us to continue building that niche for ourselves into the future.
On the roadmap here for VyFinance, going into the rest of 2024, some things that are on your roadmap you want people to be aware of, new products, new things coming out.
Yeah, so we've got, most immediately in the next few weeks, we've got a big processor upgrade and a factory contract. We're releasing our factory contract, which means users will finally be able to make their own liquidity pools. We've got multiple governance votes coming up, particularly around the construction of our ecosystem. So maybe introducing a token burn, reducing total supply, a few bunch of ecosystem things regarding farms and how we're going to manage a few of those things on our governance. So that would possibly result in future changes to our ecosystem. We're working really hard on our auto harvester, and we've got sort of a really clear path to how we're going to manage this cross-chain auto harvesting. So we're sort of looking at that being our first implementation, is what would already be a cross-chain auto harvester to begin with. And that's something that we're hoping to have an initial form of up by the end of the year. It would probably be an MVP form with 1, maybe 2 strategies, but sort of like in a simplified format. We're hoping to have that up by the end of the year. We're implementing a massive upgrade to our farms, which is starting straight after our processor upgrades. And this massive application of our farms is actually merging our farms and our vaults. I didn't really talk about our vaults. We built the first custodial staking contracts on Cardano as well, just because Cardano is already non-custodial staking, but some people want custodial staking. It's useful for businesses to be able to lock an NFT somewhere so that NFT is not on the market while you're providing a reward. So we built the first custodial contracts on Cardano for staking, 3 years ago? And now we are essentially implementing those contracts into our farming so that we can start to merge our farming with staking assets. And that's going to be very much a first on Cardano, whereby depending on the value of assets you stake, you can create, different value flows across different liquidity pools for your farm. And this is something that we're also hoping to have up in the next sort of 3 to 4 months. So that's just sort of the next 6 months. In terms of plans out for the next 2 years thereafter, it's very much focused on building out the value inside our auto harvester to make the engagement on more complex strategies as straightforward as possible for new users. And that's really the focus of everything we do at VyFi, is how do we implement these systems that have been given to us on Cardano to make as easy a user process as possible. And I think we're succeeding in that, and I think we're going to continue succeeding in that into the future. And particularly when we cross-chain and we can start to show the real power of what we've designed and the simplicity that it brings, I think it's going to start to impress people on other blockchains that have to deal with clunky things all the time whenever they're doing stuff.
Who would be the main target client, I guess, for like vaults? Would that be like institutions or just large corporations potentially?
Anyone. So at the moment, it's mostly been other tokens within our ecosystem that want to create some form of either natural inflation for people holding their token, or create some kind of rewards mechanism for users that have an NFT. So that said, that's only there are only 2 examples of implementations that we've had. We've had some people come to us with some really whack implementations that we've put together. Stuff like, we want to use your vault as a key that essentially determines whether people are allowed to access an ISPO, which is an initial stake pool offering, right? And the users would need to have our NFT first, buy our NFT, stake the NFT, and they can only access the ISPO if the NFT is staked in your vault. There's an example of a more complex integration. But essentially, however creative you are and in whatever way you can think of implementing staking, either as a gate, as a rewards mechanism, as some kind of boosting mechanism where you're able to then build a database of who is actually willing to lock their asset and who isn't willing to lock their asset, and then give external rewards through your platform for having done so. So, for example, if you lock your NFT for 6 months, you get a 10% XP boost in the game, right? X game. We would be able to implement that using our vaults.
Yeah, like I imagine like CD strategies almost, or some kind of ETF potentially, having be able to lock away assets and then let people invest in that or in that key maybe. I don't know. I feel like could be a lot of cool innovations there.
And absolutely. So first, as a starting point, merging that with our farms so that we're able to create a really bespoke rewards mechanism that we can actually utilize individual projects, and use those individual projects to motivate their community to boost liquidity. And that's what we're really focused on doing. So for example, you're an NFT project like Omni. They're launching their token soon. You're Omni, you have a token and you're running a liquidity pool with your token. And people also hold your NFT. They're using their NFT in your system. But at the same time, if you want to be driving liquidity, you could say to them, use your NFT in our system, or buy an NFT and lock that NFT against the liquidity pool. And for doing so, we're going to deliver you more rewards in both VyFi and Omni token because you've locked an NFT off the market, right? Thereby increasing the net liquidity for that project in the liquidity pool, and at the same time offering the user the capacity to access more rewards, right? Basically allowing a win-win for both the business that's managing the liquidity pool and the user that's accessing those rewards. So these sort of bespoke implementations are something that I'm really excited to start exploring with projects. And I think that if we look at it within the context of what you said there, which is the next layer again, which would be implementing these vaults into auto harvesting strategies, all of a sudden you can create essentially super bespoke risk profiles that are able to earn income off of a single asset rather than having to take on impermanent risk as well. So you could create profiles that are literally like 4 single assets rather than being LPs. And all of a sudden you can actually create single asset strategy pools that avoid impermanent risk, which is something that almost actually hasn't been seen in crypto. That's really interesting thinking.
It is. There's a lot of ways you can take it. But you guys are doing some great things. Really, really impressed with what you're doing with VyFinance. So definitely keep it up, man. We're here towards the end of the episode. It's been a really good one. It's been a fantastic conversation. Where do you want people to? Yeah, where do you want people to go if they want to check out VyFi, they want to hop on the DEX, they want to yield farm? Do you want to send them to the site? Are there any documentation, socials? Where would you direct people?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, app.vyfi.io. Come look at our site first. I think that's always the best one before you go follow us on socials, because otherwise you just get people that follow you on socials and never look at your site. So go look at our site first, app.vyfi.io, app.vyfi.io. Super easy. And we do have a very expensive docs. So if you go to docs.vyfi.io, everything that I've described is described in detail. And that's something that I really want to add. Everything I've talked about sounds complex. I know certain parts of it, particularly at the beginning when we're talking about L2LPs and non-custodial farming structures and all of this stuff. But the reason for this complexity is really for the simplicity of the user. So whilst it sounds complex, the whole reason it sounds complex is because when you go and use it, you're going to have the easiest experience you've ever had providing liquidity and farming on a DEX ever. And I can tell you that with certainty. You've never had an easier liquidity provider experience than you will with VyFi. And then, of course, follow us on Twitter. VyFi Official. If you could share those links, that'd be amazing.
Oh, yeah. Everything will be in the description down below in the episodes. If you guys are listening, watching, make sure to go check out the website first and check out all the socials, documentation. Steven, are you on LinkedIn, anywhere place people can connect with you if they want to chat as well?
Absolutely. The best place to get in touch with me would be either our Discord, our Telegram, or of course Twitter, me the BIM, METHEBIM. I actually have been able to avoid LinkedIn because I've always been a trader and I've never been trying to show off to a boss. But that being said, I really should get a LinkedIn. That's just my laziness.
You should, man. It's growing fast. It's a good way to connect with more people in the space. I mean, the Twitter sphere is very loud.
Yeah.
LinkedIn's a little bit more suits and ties.
Yeah, exactly. Legend. Thank you so much, mate. And we'll talk soon.
Likewise.